the road to 2023 Vilnius summit, the debate with the representatives of permanent representatives to NATO. Let me now welcome to the stage representative from Poland, Tomasz Szatkowski. Estonia, Yuri Luik. Slovakia, Peter Bator. This fireside chat will be moderated by Henry Foy, European diplomatic correspondent, Financial Times.
Thank you so much. There's no chair for me, of course, because I know my place as a journalist. Thank you, Mr. President, for a very kind opening address, giving us lots to talk about. It's quite daunting. I don't normally provide entertainment for heads of state, so I hope that we'll make that work. Thank you. All right. Well, that's broken the ice. Thanks a lot for coming. You've all survived Davos, and it's very nice of you to go up your final evenings, I think, for most of you to be here. It's a really thrilling topic and a really important one. It's nice to see friends here on stage and people that I'm yet to meet. For those of us, I work in Brussels, so I live and breathe NATO, but I appreciate that not everybody is a NATO nerd. So I wondered, Tomasz, if you could start by giving a little bit of a background in terms of what has been agreed up until Vilnius, and where we are in that plan, and really why it matters to ordinary people.
Yeah, thank you much, Henry, and it's a great honor to be here, to be speaking at the panel that was launched by the keynote of our president, and also with my two distinguished colleagues, to whom I'm very grateful that have accepted this invitation, and they are very strong voices in the NAC, and I always can count on their support, and we support each other in a good cause. So it's really good to be here together. But recalling of where we are, because and indeed it's a good starting point, because Vilnius will be either a merely implementing summit, or it will be an important follow-up with important decisions to the Madrid summit. In this case, Madrid summit was enormously important because it was the summit where we accepted the strategic concept that was forged in more than 2 years of a work within the alliance. But we also reacted to the aggression of Russia, an aggression that is unprecedented since the Second World War, and hence certain paradigm change. Forward defense has been introduced. This is the concept where basically we say that from now on, our aim is that each inch of the alliance's territory will be defended. Before that, we were saying, okay, I mean, if anything happens, we will react, but then it might takes time. We're kind of in a reactive mode. Now we have the ambition is much higher. Second important development has been that we have said already 2 days after Russian aggression, a very important declaration by heads of states and leaders of NATO that Russia walked away from its commitment under NATO-Russia Founding Act. So basically, we are saying it's no longer a partner. It's still a subject of a debate. I mean, what actually means. But it's a very important statement. So now, with regard to those, we'll see whether Vilnius will be just an implementation of what we have decided in Madrid, what head of states have decided in Madrid, or will it bring new decisions? And I think this is something you will be expecting from my colleagues too.
Yeah, I mean, it was explained to me sort of that before the idea was you try to convince Russia it would be a bad idea to invade, but now you're saying actually we're going to assume that you will at some point, so we're going to make sure the defense is good enough and strong enough, right? I mean, you guys obviously all represent countries on the eastern flank of NATO. Peter, do you think that the forward defense concept has been fully fleshed out and fully understood by the rest of the alliance? Because obviously it's something that was led by countries in your part of Europe, and it's way more important for you than the Portuguese, for example, who, God love them, they're probably not going to be invaded by the Russians.
Yeah, first let me start with thanking Mr. President, but also everyone from on the Polish side that made this happen. I mean, this is quite a marvelous thing. I mean, in that busy city in this time. So thanks for having us here. You know, we would probably be magicians if we said that that we achieved it between Madrid and basically we've got February or January now. So. Madrid was last year in July, so we laid the grounds for it. And as Tomasz said, it's very important to distinguish between what we had before the summit and what we had after the summit. Like before the summit, Tomasz already said it, but I will repeat it. It was if the Allied territory is attacked, then we should have enough capabilities and capacities to come and to defend. There was something else. It was what we called like the security or the insurance policy, which was the forward presence. The forward presence, let's be honest, was not there to defend. We knew it was not capable of defending the territory, but it was
the tripwire concept.
Exactly. It was like if there's 10 nations or 8 nations or 5 nations and someone is killed by illegal action by Russia or whatever, what happened in Crimea basically, then more states will be involved, and then it could trigger much bigger reaction. Now we want to have a setup in which the forces will be able to defend the country from the very first minute. Why? Because now we have learned what happened in Ukraine, that people who were under the Russian oppression, even for 1 week, they got killed, they got raped, and we cannot allow any of our citizens to suffer this. That's why we need to have sufficient forces to be there. We just laid grounds for that. It's been several months. This upcoming summit will be just the first step to see how much we have already achieved, and we are pushing hard to achieve something, because let's be honest, in 2014 Russia invaded Ukraine for the first time. It's 2023. It's been 9 years. In 9 years Russia succeeded in waging 2 wars against Ukraine, and this is a long time. That's why we need to speed up all the processes and everything. So we are on the way, but we must make sure that we will deliver. Because let me be maybe less diplomatic here.
Please be as undiplomatic as possible.
I don't think what we agreed in Madrid is something that will last for years. This is just that's why we call it baseline. This is just the very basics. We know that the relations with Russia will not be good. We know there will be a sort of a Cold War with Russia. We need to be ready, and we know we will need much more forces on our flank just to be ready to defend.
Pretty bleak, but I guess also quite good that everyone's realizing the threat. Yuri, I've been in Brussels for just over 18 months, and I've been struck by how the war has changed the way people perceive Poland, the Baltics, Slovakia, Eastern countries that for a long time have been saying this needs to be taken more seriously. Do you see the road to Vilnius as a reflection of that louder voice that countries such as the 3 countries represented here now have in Brussels, both in the EU and in NATO? Or do you think more has to be done for Western countries to listen and really listen to what you guys are saying?
First, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for this marvelous event. Indeed, very important questions to be discussed. You know, people are saying, oh, Balts, Poles, Slovaks, you were right. I mean, you really said it. The Russian state is really aggressive. It might attack. But I'm not sure whether something comes out of it. When there are debates about the future of Ukraine or alliance or what have you, or Russia, people are not saying to us, okay, you said this, because you were right the last time, I now trust you. Yeah. People are very quickly returning to their initial positions and really develop those kind of extensively. Let me give you a couple of quick examples.
Only if you name names, though.
One is forward defense. Actually, it was very difficult to get this concept through. There were very powerful communities who were against that. There was a community of the military in Western Europe partly and also in the United States, who said, look, the nature of the war has changed. We now fight in a totally different way. You know, high-tech, long-range, precision. Don't worry about these tanks and you know, APCs. And this is all old stuff. And we said, no, you know, we can see now that it is not old stuff. Tanks are moving in Europe. APCs are moving in Europe. This sort of warrants another approach. And the second point was, you know, Cold War, my friends, is a Cold War term. It means that, you know, big cores are in front, and this cannot be used today because there are no units of that magnitude. And at every moment we had to fight with these arguments. And you know the counter-arguments, so I won't repeat them here. We fought with friends who are sitting here on the table. But the problem is the arguments haven't gotten anywhere. They are not spoken about because the Madrid decisions are different. But you can feel that people try still to find perhaps more practical arguments, right, to speak about smaller units, to speak about various issues we actually sort of discarded before Madrid. So one of our tasks is really to hang on to Madrid decisions and really demand coming through and fulfilling these decisions. And as the President said, this automatically brings us also to defense spending, because the decisions in Madrid are difficult to be fulfilled, if they can be fulfilled at all, without the dramatic raise of defense spending. And today we have two targets, of course, we have to keep in mind. One is providing defensive capabilities to Ukraine, and Estonia has given 1% of its GDP up till now for supporting Ukraine. So these are big sums for a small country. And the other thing is, of course, maintaining our own depots, maintaining our own ammunition, equipment. This is not a small thing, because you know, you see how Russia fights. I mean, they have volume, they have mass, and if we believe that we can fight it with a couple of precision missiles, then we are wrong. We need mass, we need volume, we need real hands-on capabilities. And this will be a challenge for Vilnius and years after Vilnius.
I can't claim credit for this anecdote because I heard it on a different panel when I was moderating, that this gentleman said, well, the war in Ukraine has really shown that the only military force in the world that has a capable, modern air force and combined arms is NATO, and that NATO could beat Russia any day of the week, except for the 8th day when they'd run out of weapons. And I mean, that's funny, but it's also not funny. It's quite scary. I mean, how much is industrial strategy a key part of the Vilnius, the road to Vilnius, and this forward new structure for NATO? I mean, if we don't have enough factories to build the weapons, we're not going to have enough weapons, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in NATO, we see the return of the industrial debate. And of course, Poland supports the subject to be discussed and developed within the alliance. We support ideas to pull procurement requirements, to pull contracts together so that we have a scale. But let's be honest. I mean, this is. I mean, more is to be done on the national level. And it's still much to be done on the national level. And first of all, we need a long-term comprehensive planning so that the industry will know in advance how much will be needed. And if this is not the case, like with this crisis, we have to resort to some extraordinary means. Like in the case of Poland, we not only employ more than 100% of the capacity of our industry already, but we also had to make some arrangements with some rather exotic partners, but very interesting ones, like Korea, for example. Yeah, in this case, and with the assistance of Korea, we're also looking to expand our defense industrial capacity at home.
Because, I mean, obviously a very live debate right now is the Leopard debate, right? Will Germany allow other countries to export their tanks that were made in Germany to Ukraine? Lots of countries, including Poland, want to do so. If we go through with this whole idea that the EU is proposing, which is like collective buying and countries helping each other make stuff, isn't that a danger that you have a situation in the future where a country like Germany says, no, we helped build this tank, so you can't use it in a certain way? Do we need to go back to individual countries having their own reliable industry for arms? Or can we start to trust NATO partners properly? I mean, the Leopard debate for me seems to show that we can't always trust NATO partners, right? I appreciate that's a horrible question to answer, but please try.
You know, it will always remain national. I mean, to a certain extent. There are three things, and just continue what Tomasz said. Three things that we really need to see and that are not happening. The first one is a true cooperation. What we've been seeing right now is there is some small parts of the cooperation that, okay, we pull the money together and then we can give it to someone, like it happened in Slovakia. 3 states or 4 states merged, you know, the funds, and now Slovakia is producing howitzers for Ukraine. But this is not a true cooperation. You still rely on one production capacity, which is totally exhausted. This is happening all over Europe and partially also in the United States. I don't see for the time being a true cooperation among businesses, just because almost all of those businesses are still protecting their profit, still protecting their technology, still protecting their capacities and everything. They would rather produce less than to open to someone else, to new partnerships that would probably go into the heart of their business. And you know, frankly speaking, this has always been about this, like, to what extent will we be protectionism? Will we have protectionism in Europe? And why the relations between, you know, why we have been receiving so many comments, like, why are you buying F-16s, for example? Why are you buying so much from the United States? Why are you buying from there? So the protectionism is still there. And if we do not get rid of this approach, we will not have a true cooperation. Second, it's the procurement. The procurement is really a pain. Now it takes years, but not 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9, 10 years. If we want to procure quickly, if we want to deliver quickly to Ukraine, even if we had the production capacities, we need to change this. Because the problem now is that simply if state is involved, it takes for too long. And still now, I mean, we are still living in a time when you say we are going to procure, I don't know, 8x8, then you're facing for 2 years, you're facing just criticism by the public because they always say you're going to steal some money. Every time there is a new contract published by the government, it's always like, who's going to steal the money? And this is the problem that we need to, I mean, we need to work up with our publics as well, that you know, when we are procuring fast, it's because we need it so fast, and it's because, you know, we need to give it to someone else or for our own purposes. So that's why, I mean, to answer your question, it will always be partially national, and it will always, I mean, those countries who would have the decisive stake in the procurement or in the production, they will always keep hand, you know, on it. And this is a political thing. This is not industrial one.
But how do we fix that? Because obviously there are bigger countries that have more factories, and then there are smaller countries which will never have as many factories that maybe need the defense more. I mean, Estonia is a great example, right? You're never going to have enough. You're never going to have a fighter jet factory and a tank factory and so how do we make sure that you can trust each other when it comes to procurement and supply?
As I said before, it has become a major issue. And we are talking to the arms industry and are saying, look, don't you understand? You will have major markets for 15, 20 years. But they are saying, show us the money, show us the agreements. Because if we build a new factory to complement the existing factories, it's a huge investment. And perhaps peace breaks out after 10 years. And people will say, why do we need all these tanks? This has happened already. So the arms industry is, well, understandably very suspicious. they want to see the money. So we have to put money in play, on the table, before we can expect large-scale, production increases. This is particularly true when companies produce something which is complicated and which is expensive and which needs new equipment, training of engineers, etc., etc. So we have to accept that we haven't found the proper way of inducing the companies to raise the production quickly. The other problem is interoperability. I mean, it's a dirty secret, but arms companies have deliberately created weapons which are not necessarily interoperable, because then you buy the equipment, the logistics, the spare parts, everything from one company. If it would all be interchangeable, you might not necessarily do it. And this is a huge challenge today when we see various types of weaponry provided to Ukraine. I mean, how do you create the logistical backup for this equipment? On the other hand, again, just to say to arms companies, do this or do that, that's not how business works. That's not how commerce works. If they would trust that we won't be buying stuff which is not properly interoperable, then, I mean, they start to think. But it takes a serious, substantial dialogue and a serious commercial dialogue. And then there is an issue which you raised. This is an issue of trust. If I buy equipment, for instance, if I buy something from Poland, I'm not planning at the moment, but if I would.
You're already buying beer on manpower.
To be honest, we are already buying. But that aside, I mean, when I buy from Poland, I know 100% that I can use it everywhere and anywhere, and it's really mine, and I can make decisions about this equipment. So I trust the equipment working well, but I also trust the fact that Poland will not stop me. I mean, if we are talking about the national security issue. So the issue of trust has suddenly risen as a big issue, without going into details, naming countries or anything.
People can fill in the blanks.
Just let me add very quickly. These are the times when the trust is being built, because in the past we didn't have this experience, we didn't have these problems. Now the end users agreements and everything really come in place, and now this is how the trust is built. I mean, if this is going to be refused by anyone, then it would not definitely contribute to the trust. So I mean, now we are creating the trust, now we are creating the rules, now we are creating the world that or the environment that we will be working with or in for the coming years.
And like you have said in the beginning, I mean, just to sum up, to the extent you can, it's always better. I mean, if you have enough of a capacity, it's always better to go national. If you have if you have to go multinational, there may be some strings attached, and there are some lessons learned that are indeed derived from the current crisis. Leopard case is just one of them. There were more instances where we intended to provide some modern equipment to Ukraine, and there were limitations from the original equipment manufacturer country, and we are implementing those lessons now with the new procurement decisions, with the new contracts that we are signing, which are controversial in some circles on the continent. Let's put it this way.
Does it still surprise the three of you that people are still worried about escalation? People are still somehow obsessed by this idea that if we give a certain weapon to Ukraine, Russia's going to do something crazy. I mean, Russia's doing horrendous things every day, right? I mean, do you three of you understand why it still hasn't sunk in yet with some of your allies?
I've never understood it. I've never understood it, and I think we are making a major mistake by providing arms to Ukraine incrementally. sort of drip, 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 and Ukraine is then not capable necessarily of utilizing the might of its army, which is very professional and which hopefully could conduct this war and end this war much quicker. So we have to provide the equipment. And I must say, from everything which I have seen in the media, all the weapon system, long-range missiles, even fighter planes, tanks, I don't see anything escalatory there. These are the tools of conventional warfare. Russia has chosen these tools. They have chosen to fight with these tools of conventional warfare. If we want to help Ukraine, the only way to do it is to provide equal, or in our case, better capabilities. Longer range, more precision, I don't know, night vision, what have you. So that's, in a way, it's a simple solution, and I really don't understand why people are speaking about escalation.
I can certainly testify that Yuri is addressing this issue frequently in the North Atlantic Council, and his voice is sometimes difficult to bear for some of those who believe that those notions still exist. Because basically, we should remember that information operations are part of Russian strategy. Russia is trying to convince us that the only, any sort of Ukrainian victory will end up with Russia going nuclear, which I mean, we shouldn't really give in into believing. Like Yuri has said, Russia has chosen certain ways of conducting warfare, for instance, attacking strategic infrastructure, civilian strategic infrastructure. There's no really point, there's no argument why Ukraine shouldn't be allowed to do the same. Russia should bear the cost of their actions and should understand that it's a rational conclusion of their deeds.
I think
otherwise the deterrence doesn't work.
The only escalatory thing that we have been doing is that we have probably not been doing enough, because this is encouraging Russia to do more, because they do not see a seriously resolute answer to that. If we were providing as much as we are providing right now in the beginning of the conflict would look totally different. So I mean, if we say this is going to be escalatory, let's not do anything, this is escalatory, because the only party that has been escalating the conflict was Russia, with us, I mean, and now speaking about NATO, doing very little on the lethal front, nothing. Yeah. And Russia still was escalating and escalating, you know, killing civilians and so on. So, I mean, if we do nothing, then we escalate.
And I believe that we might have missed an important window of opportunity to end this war. Actually, between August and October, when Ukraine was on the counteroffensive and Russian front was about to crumble. You know, had we delivered more of the decisive weaponry, you know, Russians may have been almost driven out of Ukraine by now.
But doesn't this come back to? I mean, I remember February 24th, going to NATO headquarters, hearing the speeches by Stoltenberg, von der Leyen, blah blah blah, whatever, and then going to an intelligence briefing upstairs where I was told this war's going to be over in 5 days. So it's pointless us throwing weapons in because Russia's going to win. I mean, it seemed like NATO approached it from the wrong point of view to begin with, and we're just catching up now.
In a way, you're right. In a way, we were given a proper intelligence picture of Russian intent, and in terms of the strategic intent, in terms of how they are going to do it. Probably, I mean, we are all mistaken, underestimating Ukrainians and overestimating Russians. But I don't believe this is the actual argument when it comes to the delivery of arms. Maybe in the beginning, but then, you know, when we noticed, and we had to acknowledge that Ukrainians are actually competent in terms of defense, and Russians are sort of incompetent. Yeah, we have to say that. Directly, this was more of an issue of the escalation management, and to some extent that I can of course understand. I mean, there are large issues at stake. There is the mutual assured destruction, strategic stability, but I'm not convinced that we are drawing this fine line, this line in the actual place.
I wanted to take a bit of a step back and ask the three of you the same question. I moderated a panel here yesterday with business people and with foreign investors, and the panel agreed that counterintuitively, thanks to the war, Eastern Europe was now safer than it was before the war. because of the way allies have responded, because of the way NATO has changed its posture. Do you agree with that? Are Poland, Slovakia, and Estonia safer today than they were on February 23rd?
Speaking for Slovakia, look, before the war and before 2014, we were falsely in a very comfortable position. Yeah, because there was big Ukraine between Russia and us. If you read all the classified and unclassified strategies and forecasts, it was always written like the risk of a large-scale conventional conflict was very low. The result of it was that we went from 1.78% investment in our defense to 0.91, which was
Slovakia did?
Yes.
Wow.
Which, I mean, and just this false
almost
feeling,
as bad as Luxembourg.
Yes. I mean, this false feeling of security just almost ruined our defense. Now we jumped from 0.91 to 2%. We are, I think, among the four countries in NATO that I mean, percentage-wise, we jumped the most, and we more than doubled our budget. But not only that, there are other things. Not only that we have now, and all of a sudden, only in December, before the war, we had thousands of people in the streets protesting against the government because the government decided to sign a bilateral agreement with the United States, Defense Cooperation Agreement, which is a very general one. People wanted to overthrow the government just because of this, because they already saw the nuclear weapons on our streets, and they already saw all our airports sold to the United States, and thousands of U.S. soldiers just marching on the streets. Nothing, of course, of that happened. It totally changed in February. I mean, all those people protesting were just silent, and all of a sudden they were welcoming NATO troops. Yeah. This made Slovakia definitely safer, not only in terms of having more troops, not only in terms of investing more into our defense, but also in minds of the people. We jumped from 52% to 78% or 76% support for NATO in 2 months. Wow. This makes my country much safer than it was before. So, and then of course all the concepts now, even the let's call it, it's not a correct description, but let's call it the western part of NATO, is now much more aware of the threats, is now much more looking at least looking in the east and to the eastern flank, and they need to think about strengthening the capabilities, because now they understand it's not about their forces and on our territory, it's not about their forces and their security or our security, it's about their security, because they understand, I think everyone understands, if there's one day when there is an attack against one of us, I mean on the eastern flank, and no one comes to help us, that's the end of NATO. Yeah. And now they understand it, because now it's real. Yeah. I mean, now they see that Russia, I mean, we said Russia would never invade Ukraine in a way as they did, because it was stupid, because it was not sustainable, they did not have enough weapons for that, and they did. Why? I mean, and now when they say, okay, but they will not attack NATO because it's stupid, it's suicide, we already learned the lesson, I think.
Yeah, in a way it's extremely sad, but it's true that this has changed the security posture in the eastern flank. And I mean, NATO is one thing, but largely we have to be grateful to the Ukrainian people, because their fight has actually drastically changed the security situation in the eastern flank of NATO, and has raised the credibility, has shown that the dictators won't win, because if nations are ready to fight back, that is a very strong argument. But also, I mean, it's true that we could have never moved from tripwire approach to forward defense or deterrence by denial, or those old/new terms, which are very much now in use. But it's very important that these commitments are credibly fulfilled, because if at some point it becomes, if at some point there is a feeling that, yes, NATO made these decisions, but they are not properly fulfilled, then of course, again, immediately the deterrent power weakens. At the moment, it's quite strong. Not only because of the weapons, but also because many of the things which European and US leaders said, you know, political strengthening, bringing troops to eastern flank, Finland and Sweden becoming members, etc., 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 they have come to fruition. They have actually happened. And this is something where it has been a strong signal to President Putin that listen to what we are saying. Don't be certain that Western community is weak. And that's very helpful when it comes to nuclear weapons, because many countries have said quite openly, the countries who have actual capabilities, have said, don't do it. Don't play around with nukes. There will be huge problems for your country. And he, in a way, believes that. He has clearly been perhaps even taken aback by the strong Western reaction, and at least he doesn't use or he doesn't play this card, at least not as actively as he used to. I mean, Medvedev occasionally says something funny, but
well, that's
it's not something which we should
he normally tweets
be worried about.
After 8 p.m. and his third bottle of wine.
Yes.
Poor Dima. Anyway, I agree with you, but I think perhaps Xi Jinping has played a much bigger role in convincing Putin not to use nuclear weapons, given how much he's now relying on China. I wanted to come back there. You talked about credibility. I was at the press conference where Stoltenberg said Finland and Sweden will become members in a matter of weeks. And we're still waiting on Hungary and Turkey. Has that become a credibility issue for NATO? I mean, surely Putin looks at this and says, oh, they can't even agree amongst themselves to add these two countries. And yes, I buy the argument that if Finland was invaded, we would all go to defend them. But surely NATO needs to read the Riot Act to Turkey and Hungary and say this is a credibility issue. You're making us look bad.
Well, absolutely. This will be a credibility issue if Sweden and Finland will not be NATO members at Vilnius. But if they become NATO members at Vilnius, this still is going to be one of the shortest ratification processes in the NATO's history. So we have to have some patience. Of course, we are explaining to our allies, to our friends. We are talking. There are issues that, especially when it comes to Turkey, Sweden, and Finland, requires flexibility on both sides. And we believe this flexibility will eventually be displayed and will bring us to a successful conclusion at the Vilnius summit. I'm moderately optimistic this is going to be the case. But let me just return, if I may, to the previous issue. Indeed, we have to recognize that the glass is also half full. The months of 2021 and initial months of 2022 will be subject, I believe, of many history book and articles. There were many frustrating moments when we were trying to convince allies that indeed, this is, Russia is about to do something, and we're trying to convince allies that we need to be prepared. I remember numerous initiatives by Mr. President when he was trying to alert also other heads of state to the gravity of the issue, but eventually the morning of the 24th was one of the most positive moments, I have to say, in my NATO experience. It was one of the shortest North Atlantic Council meetings in the at least in my career at NATO, probably the shortest one. I believe one of us started to say something about, that perhaps we were mistaken or something, and one of those who were skeptics said, "Okay, I mean, just spare us. we know what we have to do." And this was the meeting of the council where first time in history we activated operational plans, and Russia was indeed able to recognize this language. There was a massive air operation, massive maritime operation, and we have the privilege to actually watch intelligence briefings, to discuss intelligence briefing, to discuss operational situation, and I can say that Russia understands that NATO is ready to respond. Russia is trying not to provoke NATO. At the same time, Russia understands that NATO is not about to invade Russia. and hence, for instance, they had a comfort to pull out much of their forces from NATO borders. And this is another argument when it comes to the how wrong is the argument about us perhaps escalating and Russia miscalculating our intents.
Yeah, maybe just to say something that almost no one knows about Poland. Poland signed the Article 4 on that morning twice. That's, everyone else signed it just once, but as Poland already had some prepared plans with the Baltic states, but then also there were other allies, namely Romania, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. So Tomasz came over to the Romanian delegation and signed it again. So there are two papers signed by Poland, so it was twice. Article 4 on the, yes, you wanted to stress that you really mean it, and rightly so. But very quickly on the credibility, I think, and I just assume that Putin is not a very strong reader. He doesn't care what we write in our documents. He cares, he can see. I mean, his eyesight is quite strong. So what he really cares about is how many troops we have on the eastern flank, how better we are prepared, how quickly we can react, and whether we can finalize the ratification process, and whether we can start the process of enlargement for Ukraine. This is what he really takes into account, not our papers, not our strategies, whatever they are, however good they are prepared. So I mean, this is, and that's why when we started this discussion about the Vilnius summit, we don't agree. I mean, and I can speak on behalf of both of them because I already heard them say that implementation summit for the heads of state is not enough for them. I mean, we can do that. It's our job, bureaucrats, ambassadors, just to take stock of the implementation. When the presidents come, when the prime ministers come to the room, they need to take bold decisions, political decisions. They need to bring something back home. When the Polish president sitting here comes back home, what would he say? We are on a good track. That's the main message from NATO summit. I mean, then if I were a journalist, I would ask, Mr. President, why did you come there? I mean, your ambassador could have briefed you on that. Yeah, I mean, that's not worth you going there. That's why we need to take care of the strategic communication and of the things that are being done by NATO.
Just to add that indeed credibility is an important, has important deterrent value, if you will. And one of the credibility issues is also the fact that in Vilnius we should make a strategic leap in moving Ukraine close to NATO. I mean, we made this commitment 14 years ago, Bucharest 2008. We reaffirmed this commitment last year, October, in the Foreign Ministerial. Now we have to show that we take this issue very seriously, because this is about the European security post-conflict. And we cannot allow to send a signal that at some instances, or in some ways, or in some tasks, Putin has won. Because one of his primary objectives was to avoid Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, so that you can take a country out of the queue with military force. And the second point, of course, is that, I mean, if we allow, after the war, Ukraine to be given some kind of a special status, or somehow deem it to be, some people are saying, perhaps it should be neutral, but with a lot of weapons, which we provide to them. The hedgehog strategy. But let's be honest, I mean, then it would be a military camp, a fortress. And Ukraine has to rebuild its country. Investors from the West should come and help to rebuild this country. But if Ukraine is in the constant sort of readiness posture, then that doesn't work. That's one of the reasons why NATO was created. It was created to provide countries like Germany, like the rest of Europe, which was devastated by war, the sound framework to develop and to be peaceful.
And to share the burden more evenly.
And to share the burden more evenly. that's why I believe that we should talk about this issue. And it's not, some people are saying, well, it's too early. I mean, let's win the war. Let's see then. I think that's, again, a wrong approach because, I mean, Atlantic Charter was signed, Roosevelt and Churchill met in 1941, I think. It was very early in the war where they decided that the war should end with democratic countries restoring their sovereignty and independence. It's very early in the war. So it's very important how we see the end of the war. And Ukraine in NATO should be, for me, it's an existential part of that.
I was glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask about this. Isn't the Ukraine debate, the Ukraine membership debate, going to make these discussions over weapons sending and discussions over forward posture look tiny in comparison? I mean, there are Western states that I could name now that I know are against this. How do we get something out of Vilnius that is not just a statement of we will keep working on Ukraine's membership? How can you convince those countries in the west of the alliance that are nervous that making Ukraine a member would be provocative?
Yes, I would like to underline one very, very important element. I don't know you remember what I said yesterday during our debate with Jens Stoltenberg and Deputy Prime